So funny enough, what I had to bring to the table was based off of Jimmy and Action Jordan.
Wonderful. And unplanned, folks. Unplanned.
Completely unplanned. We do not talk before the show. Not about the show. So here's what happened. I fell down a rabbit hole because at the beginning I was like, okay, what's going on with this? You know how I feel about it. I really don't like to pay attention to it because to me, it's just a circus. It's just a sideshow. There's so many things going on in the world right now, which is part of why I was annoyed by it, which is what eventually got me to look at it because it's annoying me. I'm like, what? We have so many problems in the world. We have so many problems at home. We have housing crisis. We have inflation. We've got a looming recession. You've got it's just tit. There's so much going on in America. There's so much going on in the world. And what is our Congress doing? What are they doing? They're fighting over who should speak for them as a majority party, or the House of Representatives. They're fighting over who should speak for them as the majority party. You're just like, what an absolute fracking show. That's how I feel. That's how I feel about it. And I was like, is there a way that this should not happen? Is this the way the founders intended the country to exist? Is this the way the founders intended us to cohabitate? And so I said, why is it the vice president? Why is it the vice president just running why aren't they speaker? Basically is what I went at. Why is it the vice president speaker? Then anyone who's a history nerd or a civics person is going to be like, you fool. It's because they're president of the Senate. It's like, you're right. The reason they're not Speaker of the House is because they're president of the Senate. And then I said, why are they president of the Senate? What, can't the president be president of the Senate? I feel like, isn't that a little bit more logical? Just let the president be president of the Senate and let the vice president be the Speaker of the House. And now I'm going to go on a little bit more of a segue. I'm talking to friends the other day and I go, what the heck happened to Kamala Harris? Where is Kamala? Where is Kamala Harris? And I was like,
she's got things going on, right? She's doing things.
Well, at first I was like, I know she's alive, but I basically said, did she make a deal with a sea witch and lose her voice? And anyone who has kids is going to get that reference. And no, and the Atlantic wrote a piece about, is Kamala Harris ready to be the president, which I found to be a ridiculous piece. Not because I'm defending this woman in any way, shape, or form.
Does anyone ask that of a vice president? Has that ever been about
That's
anyone?
kind of how I felt about it. I was like, does anyone ask? First of all, they're vice president. So why are you asking if they're ready to be president? They obviously are ready to be president the minute they took over the role of vice president.
And there's not a lot of vocal VPs.
Well, I think that we've gotten spoiled. I think we've been spoiled. I mean, we're coming off of being the children during the Clinton era, where Al Gore was I can't remember if it's because he ran for president, but I always had an image where Al Gore was quite known, even for being for a vice president. And of course, Dick Cheney was infamous. Not for great things.
Cheney was that's the exception, right? Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just saying I can only go off of our lived experience. And our lived experience, we've had some pretty in-your-face vice presidents.
And he was also part of other administrations. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Rumsfeld and all this.
Yeah. Look, I know there are reasons for it. I'm just talking about our lived experience. We've been party to a lot more active vice presidents. So it's been a little bit of a Hillary was for what she was doing, a very active. Well, she wasn't vice president. She was Secretary of State. So she was an outsized Secretary of State to the point where I was like, I think she was vice president. Anyway, all I'm saying is that to have a VP that is this just quiet, obviously it's not just us, because there are big think pieces being written about why is this woman so quiet? Is this woman ready to actually take over the role of president?
I mean, Pence was quiet, but he mostly just stood behind Trump licking his lips. Like, I didn't really understand what was going on.
There was that, yeah. And I guess he was more of a lightning rod for jokes. So more people talked about him because, him and mother, right? Anyway, going back to I was thinking, I was like, shouldn't the VP just be the Speaker of the House so we never have to run into this? And then I was like, all right, what are people going to say? They're going to be like, well, if I'm a Republican and I want a voice in the House and we have a majority and the VP's a Democrat, I don't like that. I'm like, does it matter? Because you have the majority.
Also,
anyway.
You didn't do your job. Your majority.
Yeah, that's what I felt. Exactly. I was like, it doesn't matter. Is that irrelevant? But then I was like, you know what? People, they're going to argue. So I was like, let's just appease them, whatever. Uh, maybe and then that led me to, well, maybe the VP should just be elected separately. And then I was like, but why doesn't that happen? Because technically, doesn't that make sense? And then I went back to the history of how the VP, because we've talked about that before. Usually, back before the 12th Amendment, the VP was usually just the guy who came in second.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how you get a more partisan politics, because
it makes sense to me.
And the thing is,
I guess it didn't make sense to the people at the time. I don't
know.
It
did. It did make sense to the people at the time. It just didn't make sense to the people in 1804, but it made sense to the people in 1779, 1780 something. It made sense up until
it's a way not to have half the country lose.
But here's the funny thing. So I go and read the 12th Amendment, and I reread it, and and let me just say this. I love history. Like, I love reading old texts, but sometimes, I read modern amendment, like modern changes to like state constitutions, and the language is very plain. It's written in like someone changed the state constitution in 1976. It's written like people would have talked in 1976. It's funny.
We've lost our flair
for the dramatic. But you go back to and I'm like, who does anyone really like? What portion of the population can read an amendment or the Constitution?
It sounds like it's cryptic for a reason.
Exactly. It's because and you're so far removed from that period that you don't have the context. So it's even harder to understand what they're trying to say, which people talk about. All right, that's another thing. So I had to look this up, because I was like, all right, wait, I'm reading the 12th Amendment. It's telling me that the VP should. It's not saying anything about the VP being part of a ticket. It doesn't talk anything about parties. It literally says I could elect the VP. And I'm like, I must be insane. That doesn't make any sense, because we don't vote for the VP. So what is it about the 12th Amendment?
You vote for the ticket, though, and that's what the parties do.
But that's not what the 12th Amendment was.
But at least parties it's a subversive layer on our government.
Hold on. So
damn it, Antoine.
Just give me. So I went over it. So I had to look it up, and I got to ThoughtCo. All right, much credit to them. Much credit to Tom Burse. Okay, and this is what it said. It said the president and vice president of the United States campaign together and are elected as a team and not individually following the adoption. And not individually following the adoption of the 12th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which was drafted to prevent the nation's two highest elected officials from opposing political parties. The amendment made it more difficult, but not impossible, for voters to elect members of two political parties as president and vice president. So it's interesting that at that point.
But that's why we can have mixed tickets. Right? We can. I know. Like
you can. But I'm just saying. But the impetus of why they did this amendment was to make more of a symbiotic relationship, as opposed to having an adversarial one. Because if you read the diaries and you read the time, having the VP and the president.
Were they still doing duels back then? Was that part of the issue? No one wanted to get shot.
No, because I mean, even Hamilton's duel was only legal in Jersey. Jersey. You guys were Jersey was the only backwater.
I don't want to get shot by my VP. We could outlaw guns. No. Let's not get crazy. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have a 12th Amendment.
That's crazy. That is crazy. I love that.